In 1924, the world's greatest escape artist claimed he survived something no one could debunk, because it happened under the pyramids of Egypt. The story was so unsettling it took H.P. Lovecraft to put it on paper. Today we're descending under the pyramids, where history, horror, and Houdini collide.
Dream or not, that revealed to me the supreme horror world above, the unknown god of the dead, and the rope bit deep, as though resenting my descent. And I know it was only a dream.
Good evening, everyone. You're listening to the Common Anomaly Podcast. You're listening to Season 3, Episode 2. I'm Stuart James, your host. Joining me today is Clayton James. How's it going, brother?
It's going really good today.
Great. We had a little false start there, hey? Things got a little bumpy on the recording end.
Oh, it's fine.
Yeah, on the technical end. So we're trying to get our stride back, but I tell you, I'm really excited for this episode. I think we've got a little hidden gem for our audience today.
Yeah. I've been so excited to get to this story.
Yeah, and I know we were talking last season, we really wanted to do something with Houdini. I forget how it originally came up, but we started talking about Houdini, and we're trying to think of what kind of episode we could build around him. You suggested this, and this really seemed super interesting to me, this connection with H.P. Lovecraft, that I had no idea existed. I'd never heard of this story. So why don't you introduce this topic to our audience a little bit, because I thought this was so fascinating when you brought this up.
Yeah, so I had actually never heard about this until just recently. So on my recent trip down to the US, we were through Denver. Stopped at my favorite bookstore in Denver. It's called Black and Red, and they sell used and new books and board games and stuff like that. And they always have like this little section on H.P. Lovecraft, which I think is really cool. Just browsing through there, and I found this book called Lovecraft, A Look Behind the Cthulhu Mythos.
Yeah.
And it was basically this study of Lovecraft's life and his work and basically where he got all his ideas.
Yeah.
Whether any of them were based on anything true, it was a neat little look into his life and his process.
Right.
Pretty dry reading unless you're a complete nerd about H.P. Lovecraft like I am.
Yeah.
But I really enjoyed it.
Or an author yourself or a writer or whatever, I imagine.
Yeah. So I was kind of reading through it here and there, and I came upon this part where, H.P. Lovecraft, he didn't consider his own fiction his true work. He considered his true work to be proofreading and editing and ghostwriting other people's work.
Right. Okay.
He did this quite a bit. Like he's written far more stories than people know him to be credited for because he was a ghostwriter for other people. He published his own fiction very infrequently. I was reading about this little story that he wrote with Harry Houdini. So at this magazine that H.P. Lovecraft was writing for, it was called Weird Tales. In the early 20s, this magazine had a column called Ask Houdini. And Houdini would actually write for the magazine. People would write in and ask Houdini questions. And
That's right, yeah.
Houdini would give little responses to them. And I guess through his work at the magazine, the owner of this magazine, his name was J.C. Henneberger. He had heard this anecdote Houdini would tell. Years ago, he had this trip to Egypt. Something really weird happened to him in Egypt.
Yeah.
And it sounded like this crazy story.
Yeah.
J.C. Henneberger was like, you should write that. You should put that down and we can publish it in the magazine. That's a great story. Houdini kind of hummed and hawed about it. And he's like, well, I'm not actually much of a writer. And I just don't feel like sharing this story around. And I'm just not much of a writer. But Henneberger really wanted this story because he really wanted to, I guess, mythologize Houdini more, which would
help his magazine.
Help his magazine.
His struggling magazine.
Yeah. So he said, I'll tell you what. We've got this young up-and-coming writer who sometimes submits stories to our magazine. Maybe he could ghostwrite it for you. You could work with him. You could sit down and have a story session, kind of hash out the details. This story sounds right up his alley. Sounds like just like one of his stories. So he introduces Houdini to a young H.P. Lovecraft, and the two sit down and hash out this story. I was so fascinated when I read this in the book, and even more fascinated that it was just kind of glossed over, that this H.P. Lovecraft story was actually based on a true experience of Harry Houdini.
Houdini. Yeah, it's really cool. I find this really interesting. It got me really excited. And I got even more excited after I read it. And I've been reading it over and over again. I've been combing through it quite a lot because we want our video in February to be kind of a companion piece to this episode. And so I've been spending a lot of time with this text. And the more I read this story, the more I love it. It's really good. It's a really cool story. I do want to pose a bit of a question to our audience as we're unpacking this story and talking about it a bit. Do you think Houdini was telling a true story in this work or performing his most convincing illusion ever? I don't know what you think. I don't know much about H.P. Lovecraft. I know you're a big H.P. Lovecraft fan. I've just recently started to read some of his work. I was peripheral, kind of both, I'm aware of Harry Houdini, but I wasn't super familiar with him. And it's much the same with H.P. Lovecraft. I know the name. I know Call of Cthulhu. I'd not read it, but just through pop culture referencing kind of what's going on there.
Yeah.
Right? In a peripheral way. But I've gone really deep into catching up and learning about both these characters this past 2 weeks, and it's been really rewarding. But I know you're a huge H.P. Lovecraft aficionado, are you not?
Oh, yeah. I was really excited to have an excuse to talk about him again on the show. And we've talked about Lovecraft a few times on the show. We always seem to come back to him here and there. And one of the things I keep saying about him is he channeling something through his writing? Because we talked about him in our little segment about the Necronomicon.
Yeah.
This fictitious book of magic he incorporates into a lot of his fiction. Suddenly there's a real world version of it out there that's actually inspired several cults and several real world murders.
Yeah, and people attribute real mystical powers to that text.
Yeah. When we're talking about Operation High Jump, I had mentioned that his novella of H.P. Lovecraft's At the Mountains of Madness seems to predict that exact scenario. Yet it was published a good 20 years before Operation High Jump. So
really fascinating stuff. Well, I think we should dig into it and start unpacking the story a little bit and start teasing apart some of these connections. Hey, what do you think?
Yeah.
But hit us up in the comments. Let us know what you think of this story and how much of it you think is true. It's told, for one, in a first-person perspective from Houdini's perspective.
Yeah.
Very much starting with his real life and events that we already know were real-life events happening for Houdini at the time.
Yeah, this is in 1910.
Yeah.
This takes place.
And he's doing a tour through Europe and the United Kingdom of his magical acts and his escape artist acts. And he's got another contract coming up after in Australia, touring Australian theaters. Mm-hmm. And so he and his wife are traveling together, and they had lots of time, so they were going to do some traveling before heading to Australia for his next engagement. They land in Egypt. One of the funny parts about the story I found really interesting is how disappointed he was with Egypt upon their arrival.
Yeah,
and how Europeanized it was.
Yeah, he was expecting a bit more color.
Early 19th century, Egypt was really popular in the mystical... People would have mummy unwrapping parties. Archaeology was very fast and loose in those days. They used a lot more dynamite. But there was a huge popularity in America and in Europe with the kind of mysticism of ancient Egypt. It was very popular at that time. And that's what they really wanted to engage, kind of the Arabian Nights atmosphere and the mysteries of the East. And they got there and they found it very tourist-bound, which I thought that was really interesting because that's what I would imagine traveling the world today would be like. You hear that. Everywhere you go, it's just a giant tourist trap.
Oh, honestly, in my research for this episode, at one point I was actually looking at Giza on Google Maps, and I was so disappointed because you have this image in your mind of Giza and the pyramids and the Sphinx, and it's out in the desert. You look at it, how it looks now on Google Maps.
Yeah, it's all restaurants.
The pyramids are there,
hotels.
the Sphinx are there, but it's all surrounded by like high density housing and restaurants. And
well, because Cairo's right
Cairo's
there.
Grown kind of around it.
Yeah, that's right. It's really kind of encroached on the plateau itself. And a lot of tourist development. But I was really surprised to hear that from someone traveling there in the early 19th century. You'd think that wouldn't have happened yet, but I guess that was already well underway.
Yeah.
But anyway, as the story unfolds, they finally make it to Cairo, and now they're seeing a bit more of the Egypt they wanted to see. Mm-hmm. They hook up with this what do you call it? A Baedeker.
Yeah.
Or
He's a guide.
basically a tour guide.
Yeah, he's
right?
a tour
Someone
guide.
who's going to look after them, show them all the sights, take care of all the little bits and pieces of travel, get them some camels. This is where it starts to get interesting. Houdini finds himself in a bit of a spot. Do you want to talk about how he gets into a bit of trouble here?
Yeah, so during the day, they'd gone out to see the pyramids. They didn't actually go into the pyramids. They just kind of toured around the outside. And Houdini was kind of regretting this as they went back to Cairo. And he's like, at my earliest opportunity, I want to take another visit to the Giza Plateau, because that feels like a missed opportunity. So that evening, he ends up just going out for a walk with this guide. What was the guide's name again?
Abdul
Rice.
Abdul Rees.
Yeah, Abdul Rice. So Abdul is just kind of walking him through what he calls the local quarter of Cairo.
Yeah, just the bazaars and shops and stuff like that.
Because Houdini really wanted to see it by night.
Yeah.
See what went on there. And this guide ends up bumping into this other character.
Yeah, and like another acquaintance, apparently.
Yeah,
and they have
someone
a
who
beef.
seems to know him and doesn't seem particularly fond of him either. And the two of them get into a bit of an altercation. They get into a bit of a fight. And
They start arguing, and then it turns into pushing and shoving.
Yeah, and Houdini actually has to intervene and physically separate them.
Yeah.
And he says the two of them composed their wrath, as Lovecraft puts it in the story. They're going to settle their differences, as is the tradition in Egypt, with a midnight fist fight on top of the
Great
pyramid.
Yeah, which is super cool. It probably is not real. It's probably not a real tradition.
That's probably a made-up tradition.
But if I were him, I would be all in as well. I was like, you guys are going to like duke it out on top of the Great Pyramid. Let's do it. I'm there. And it was like, it's like a duel. It was set up like a duel. Like, we'll meet at midnight. And he talks about Abdul, Houdini then have to go and kind of round up a gang, round up a posse. Because he's got to have a group of tough-looking guys with him when he shows up at the top of the pyramid for this showdown at midnight.
Yeah, and Houdini's just loving this.
Oh, yeah,
he's like, I can't
over,
wait to see this.
As any of us would be, right? This sounds awesome. Mm-hmm. And so he goes, thinking this is going to be amazing. And again, the fight is maybe a bit of a disappointment.
Yeah, they climb to the top of the pyramid, and there's a platform on the pyramid.
Because the capstone of the pyramid is well worn away. So there is actually a bit of a flat at the top of the Great Pyramid. Peak of a pyramid, cut off. It's a square platform. It's just like a boxing ring. Yeah.
This giant posse that they've rounded up, gather round, they form a square circle.
Yeah.
And these two guys, they go at it.
They duke it out. Yeah.
And
apparently Abdul wins.
Yeah, Abdul wins.
Pretty easily. I guess it wasn't too violent of a fight.
And then everyone's friends again.
But then everyone's friends again, and they just, start drinking and partying, and it's all the past, right?
Yeah.
But as the revels are going on, Houdini's just reveling in the atmosphere and feels really proud to have gone on this little journey with Abdul. He's really immersed in it. He's feeling great. And he's realizing that he's kind of the focus of attention of the group. Everyone seems to be looking at him, talking about him. He only very loosely understands Arabic, but from what he can pick up, they're talking about his magical act and his performances. And he starts to get the impression that this is negatively received.
Yeah, he starts getting a really weird vibe at this point.
Yeah. And just right at the time he starts feeling like there's something suspect is going on, they all gang up and descend upon him and tie him up, gag him, and blindfold over his face and start hauling him off. And I guess they folded his knees back and tied his ankles to his wrists and really bound him up tight with a bunch of rope.
Yeah, and he's saying he's Houdini, but even he is.
There's 20 guys.
There's 20 guys.
Yeah, he can't resist, right? And so they're hauling him off to who knows where. And he can hear Abdul's voice kind of mocking him as they're carrying him down the pyramid. This challenge, your magical powers are no match for the powers of Egypt.
Yeah.
Of the land of Egypt, because Egypt holds its own mysteries.
Yeah, and Egypt is very old.
It's very old and has an old magic of its own. And your magic is going to be tested against Egypt's magic. Mm-hmm. They take him, they carry him off some distance. He doesn't know where.
He knows he's off the pyramid. He's back on the ground because he can feel the sand.
He can feel the sand, yeah.
And they drag him somewhere. And they've already got him tied up, but they put more rope across his chest.
Yeah.
They start lowering him down a hole in the ground.
And it's a very deep descent. It's actually very a long descriptive sequence of how deep this cavern is. And he's getting banged up. He's hitting walls, craggy surfaces. He's bumping into things. He's getting cut. He's bleeding. He describes this descent of him being lowered by rope as taking forever. He's traveling deeper, deeper into the core of the earth. He has no idea, but it feels like it takes forever.
He's getting quite beat up on the way down.
Yeah.
Because they're not being gentle with him. He loses consciousness at some point.
Yeah. He actually describes at several points in his ordeal being subject to these fever dreams.
Yeah,
almost.
like during his descent down the hole, he describes losing consciousness and going into this dream where he was like a bat flying through hell.
Well, eventually he reaches the ground and he realizes he's got to get out somehow.
Yeah.
He kind of has this crazy, wild fever dream, but he comes to, remembers the situation he's in, and at this point, he's a little more confident. He has no idea where he is, but he knows he's in a very deep hole somewhere on the plateau. But he can very easily get out of his bonds.
Yeah, now that
they really tied
20
him up
guys
tight,
aren't
but,
all over him.
Yeah, but this is his profession. This is what he does. He's an escape artist.
Yeah, he's like, I can get out of this.
Yeah.
His main worry was that he was confident he could get out of these bonds. His main worry was that, well, I'm still attached to this big rope that they've lowered me down from, and if I disturb this at all, they're going to feel the movement because this rope is still taut. They're still holding it at the top. And if they feel any movement, they're going to know I've escaped, and they're going to be waiting for me at wherever the entrance to this place is. So he was very, very careful in trying to break his bonds. Yeah. But he does cause some movement on the rope, and he says after the rope just drops.
Yeah, it runs slack and then just starts coming down in heaps. But then what's crazy again is he's describing how much rope actually piles up.
Yeah, he's getting more of an idea of how deep underground he is.
Yeah, because apparently this was a very long length of rope and it just kept piling up all around him. And it seems at this point that may have been somewhat of a fever dream himself. We're kind of getting in this foggy territory where we're not sure what's real at this point, because this is another point where he kind of loses consciousness and comes back, and it's like he was being basically buried in these heaps of rope. But when he comes to again, he's on top of it and he's fine. So we don't know exactly what happened there, but he's in pitch darkness. He can't see anything. And he's got to try and feel his way out of wherever the hell he is. He describes it as being this awful pungent aroma, rotten food or something, combined with incense and other smells and flavors of the area, but being really putrid.
Yeah, and it's like a draft that's blowing.
Yeah, and so he kind of figures out this awful smelling draft. That's the only sensory clue he has. He's going to follow it in that direction because maybe it leads towards an exit of some kind.
Yeah.
Do you want to describe what happens next to him? What he ultimately finds?
So yeah, he's following this draft because he figures it'll lead to an exit. And he reaches a set of stairs leading down and realizes, I went the wrong way. This leads further down.
He's heading even deeper into whatever this chamber he is in.
He actually falls down these stairs into an even deeper chamber.
And he describes them as being really giant steps too. Like they're really big block steps. So he's in some kind of construction. And this is something I want to tease apart a little later after we get to the end and start breaking things down. And he's describing these massive columns in this giant gallery, hieroglyphs all over them. And he saw a bunch of stuff on the plateau. He had toured the plateau earlier in the day. And so he didn't know where he was, but he thought he was in what is called the Temple of the Sphinx.
Yeah.
And obviously in some portion of it that is not seen by tourists.
Yeah.
This is an underground construction, obviously very deep below the plateau.
Yeah, and it's a massive place he describes. There's a line in the story that he's talking about the columns that are in this place, and he says the mere base of one of these columns would have dwarfed the Eiffel Tower to insignificance.
Yeah.
So this is a huge underground space he's in.
Cyclopean, he describes him as, or Cyclopean.
Yeah.
He's really a big
I think
fan
that's
of
more
that
Lovecraft than Houdini.
Yeah, that's
Lovecraft loves that word.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what I was making note of, because I read fair bit of Lovecraft over the past, and yeah, he likes that word.
Yep. Crops up quite a bit in his writing.
But anyway, so he's working his way through this darkness, this amazing underground gallery. Then he starts seeing these weird shadows and lights, and it looks like there might be some people down here. He's hearing chanting and some music, and he sees these shadows starting to appear reflected on the column wall. Mm-hmm. And what he discovers is there's these weird shambling monsters, almost like animated mummies.
Yeah.
That have been fitted with different animal parts.
Yeah, composite mummies.
Yeah, composite mummies.
Like human mummies with the heads of animals grafted onto them.
Yeah, but they're up and walking around.
Yeah.
And shambling around and kind of doing this weird chanting. It's looking like they're all shambling around the central point where there's this other big opening. And then what does he see?
Who's leading these mummies? But his tour guide.
That's right. Who
he had commented on earlier having a resemblance to Khafra.
Yeah. At this time referred to as Nephrin or Knephrin. I really struggle with that
Khafrin
one.
is how
Khafrin?
it's referred to in the story, but it's Khafra, Khafra's pyramid. He had commented earlier how much his guide Abdul Rice had a resemblance to Khafra, whose face is on the Sphinx. But then who's leading this procession? Abdul Rice. They're all processing towards this giant opening at one side of this chamber, this giant portal. Houdini describes seeing a tossing offerings of... It's never really explicitly stated in the story what these offerings are.
Yeah, I was curious to get your take.
It's implied that they're human body parts.
Yeah, that's what I was imagining.
That's the implication I was getting.
There's a couple moments where what we're led to believe is happening is not directly said. It's funny the way it's written,
But they're tossing these offerings in front of this giant portal. Eventually what emerges from this portal is what Houdini and Lovecraft describe as a giant 5-headed creature with tentacles coming out of it that is grabbing up these offerings and devouring them.
See, I'm curious to know, just to pause for a moment, but that description, when I read it, I was like, rigid tentacles. This sounds almost mechanical. Mm-hmm. But anyway, keep going. And this thing is huge, right? He said the trunk is like the size of a hippopotamus.
Yeah. He describes the creature initially as being this 5-headed creature, roughly the size of a hippopotamus, which is grabbing up these offerings. He starts backing up these stairs, but he's really curious as to what's going on. He says he wishes the thing would... Because the thing keeps darting in and out of this portal.
Yeah,
grabbing
this little cavity.
These offerings. And he's like... wishes the thing would just come out all the way so he could
see it.
A better look at it. And then he says, and it did emerge.
Yeah.
And it did emerge. And he turns and he runs and he has this...
And he's just scrambling.
Kind of fever dream escape from whatever this place is.
And he just starts climbing these stairs. And he's in total darkness. So he's just in panic.
Yeah.
Trying to get away from this
because
monster.
What he realizes when the creature finally emerges all the way is what he was seeing wasn't a 5-headed monster the size of a hippopotamus. What he was seeing was the forepaw
of an even more immense...
a much bigger monster.
Yeah.
And that's when he turns and runs. He has this confusing fever dream of an escape, and he just wakes up the next morning outside of the Sphinx.
Yeah, right in front of the Sphinx. And Abdul is nowhere to be found.
Yes, and the authorities have no record of this man, Abdul Rice, the tour guide.
Yeah.
He wakes up on the Giza Plateau and he looks up at the Sphinx and he recalls earlier the previous day, he was kind of wondering because there's always been this theory about the Sphinx for a really long time. People think Khafra built the Sphinx. That's the official line.
Yeah.
Khafra had the Sphinx built in 2500 BC.
Yeah. And I believe that is still the official
That is the official line, but...
Although that's really starting to be on more and more shaky ground.
Because one of the theories about the Sphinx is that's Khafra's face carved into it, but not the original face.
Yeah, it was
That was
originally like a jackal or something.
either a jackal or a lion, and Khafra had his face carved into it. But it was originally a much bigger head on there. That's why the head is so out of proportion with the rest of the body with the Sphinx. Yeah. And Houdini says he was just wondering the previous day, what was the original form of the Sphinx? He wakes up and he's like, oh my god, what kind of monster was this Sphinx originally carved to represent?
Right.
But it was all a dream. Surely it was a dream.
But
It
so
must
vivid.
have been a dream.
Yeah.
And that's kind of where the story ends.
Yeah.
It must have been a dream.
Well, and it's worth noting that being an entertainer and a performer and a magician, and even I learned Houdini did dabble in mystic performances like seances and spirit contacts, that sort of thing. He did not believe in anything paranormal. He was very much a staunch skeptic. And he actually spent a lot of time actively debunking mystic charlatans. Even though he participated in this himself, he didn't believe in any of this woo nonsense. Like, he was a very pragmatic, scientific guy.
Yeah, especially in the 1920s when this story was published. This is kind of the phase in Houdini's life where he was very much all about actively debunking spiritual mediums and seances. He took it really far, too. He kind of turned this into like a personal crusade.
Yeah.
I believe it was 1924.
He thought it was all garbage. He
Yeah,
thought it was all garbage.
in 1924, he even testified to Congress on the subject because he wanted laws passed to basically outlaw spiritualism, mediumship. He wanted it outlawed. He described it as evil.
Yeah.
So it's a little odd. It's a little odd to see Houdini put his name on this story.
That's right, because
Which is,
when it was originally released in Weird Tales, pulp magazine that it was featured in, it was told under his name.
Yeah.
H.P. Lovecraft was not credited until years later, not until like 1940 or something. Right?
Yeah, it was, I believe, Weird Tales republished the story in 1938 under a different title, and they actually credited H.P. Lovecraft as the author.
Yeah, but not until years later.
Yeah.
So it was ghostwritten with, originally released and published with Houdini's name on it, and he liked the story. He collaborated very closely with H.P. Lovecraft in its development, and he really enjoyed the final product. That doesn't mean his intention for it was that it be relating absolute fact. And we know enough about H.P. Lovecraft now in retrospect in his style of writing. There's a lot of H.P. Lovecraft in this story.
Oh, yeah.
Obviously, these bizarre monsters.
This is what led to the introduction to H.P. Lovecraft. Is the owner of this magazine said, this story, anecdote from your trip to Egypt, it is right up H.P. Lovecraft's alley. Like, this sounds like one of the stories he would write for us.
Yeah. I guess that's what was so absorbing of this story for me, is I was really trying to decipher along the way as I'm reading the story how much of this is real and how much of this is Lovecraft embellishing to make the story more fun.
It's an interesting thing about Lovecraft, because I've mentioned it before. Is Lovecraft channeling something through his writing? Lovecraft did not take the approach to writing that most successful writers take. You listen to a guy like Stephen King, a really successful writer. He will go on and on about the need for discipline, writing every day, and really having a routine and being disciplined about it. It's a craft you have to practice. Yeah. Lovecraft was not like that. He often described his ideas for stories coming to him in dreams.
Yeah.
Something would just strike him in a dream. He'd obsessively write about it. That's why he published his own work very infrequently. The editor at the magazine found him very frustrating to work with. Mm-hmm. The readers loved him, but he published so infrequently. He was so undisciplined about it. He handed in manuscripts that were just really unprofessionally done.
Right.
Just frustrating to work with.
So he was a true artiste, is what you're saying.
Actually, I've got a great quote about Lovecraft from this book. I just have to throw in here because it says so much about his personality. This is the author Lynn Carter talking about H.P. Lovecraft. Lovecraft was such a bundle of contradictions that he will be the despair of his eventual biographer. How does one deal with a man so quirky and changeful and perverse that within a month after selling his first story to Weird Tales, he turns around and writes a piece of snobbish idiocy such as the following? This is Lovecraft. I am well nigh resolved to write no more tales, but merely to dream when I have a mind to, not stopping to do anything so vulgar as to set down the dream for a boorish public. I have concluded that literature is no proper pursuit for a gentleman, and that writing ought never to be considered but as an elegant accomplishment to be indulged in with infrequency and discrimination. So he publishes his first story, he has his first big success, and
I'm not going to write anymore.
Goes to his head a little bit, and he's like, I have concluded I shall publish no more tales. It is not a worthy pursuit of a gentleman of my caliber.
Yeah.
I prefer merely to dream.
But we know he wrote a lot more after that, right? He's
when the inspiration struck.
Yeah, I like that. And I like that connection to what is he accessing, drawing a lot of his inspiration from dreams. Because we've talked before on the show about where does artistic inspiration come from? Can it be accessing kind of another field of information? And that's another aspect of this story that leaped out to me, because our last episode on Egypt, when we talked about the Khafra project from last year, those, I don't know, I forget the name, I think it's SARS.
Yeah.
The SARS scan.
Yeah.
That Italian team came out with, being able to penetrate deep below the surface, and they made these sensational claims of these incredible works underneath the Khafra pyramid, these massive columns going kilometers deep into the plateau with these massive cube structures beneath, right? That just have to be man-made. And what Lovecraft and Houdini are describing in this story sounds a lot like that. He's talking about these gargantuan columns, these staircases that go down and down with these huge steps into this massive square gallery that you could fit the Eiffel Tower in. I did some checking because that was very much focused on Khafra last year when we looked at that story. But I went back to Trevor Grassi's YouTube page, and he's a gentleman who's connected to that Italian group and was actually the first guy to leak that information with their permission.
Yeah.
And I was watching more of his videos, and there is actually additional scans he talks about showing voids in the Sphinx, in the structure of the Sphinx, which we knew were there, but then access points that do descend deep, and there's a column underneath the Sphinx that leads to another big cube chamber, which is exactly what's being described here in this story.
So I also made that connection back to that Italian study, and I got really curious. So I did some math.
Yeah,
okay. Or actually, I got AI to help me do some math because I'm really bad at math.
Right, okay.
And this math ended up getting way more complicated than I thought it would get. But I got really fixated on this detail, columns that would dwarf the Eiffel Tower. And I got to thinking, how deep underground would Houdini had to have been to allow for this kind of space? So I kind of took the text describing that space based on this description of the columns and their scale. How deep underground would that have to be? AI did all sorts of math involving the perspective and the lighting and the distance Houdini was standing from them.
Yeah.
And it kind of gave me a rough estimate. And it said, well, if the base of the column was, let's say, just the base of the column was as tall as the Eiffel Tower, Houdini would have to have been at least 3 kilometers underground.
Right.
Let's allow for a bit more colorful description by Lovecraft.
Yeah, maybe it's exaggerated somewhat.
I said, maybe, okay, what about just the whole column is the size of the Eiffel Tower? Yeah. How deep underground would he have had to have been? I came up with a calculation of between 0.6 and 1 kilometer underground.
That very much aligns with what those scans seem to show.
Yeah. But then I got fixed, like, how long was that rope?
Totally.
How would that work? So I got to do some more calculation. I'm like, whatever was standard for a length of rope at that time and place, 1910 Egypt, how many end-to-end lengths of rope would need to be tied together?
Yeah, to make basically
to
a
lower
kilometer-long rope. Yeah.
To lower someone to this depth. Came up with, it was more reasonable than I thought it would be between 90 and 120 lengths of rope.
Right.
Would it be reasonable for a team of 20 people to tie these together in, say, a day?
Yeah.
Yeah, that could be done. Could you lower a man with such a rope? Chatbot was like, no. You need like a pulley system. You need some very elaborate rigging to do that. Or else it'd be very dangerous. The person would get horribly beat up, horribly injured.
Well, that's exactly what happened.
And I'm like, oh, that's not a concern. They're not going to be gentle about it.
Yeah.
Chabab was like, oh, absolutely,
Well,
yeah,
these
that's
are,
possible.
these are rough and tumble Bedouins here, right?
Yeah.
So they probably
Like
know
it-
what they're doing.
Probably sustain horrible injuries, but if anyone was going to survive a descent like that, it would be a man like Houdini,
Yeah.
who had such physical conditioning.
Yeah, that's right. He was something else. Like I read a biography on Houdini this past week. Yeah, really admirable guy. Really interesting. And yeah, the physical conditioning he put his body through to do his escapes and his tricks was incredible and incredibly demanding. Probably contributed a great deal to his death because he put his body through so much. Tricks didn't always go well, and he suffered a good deal of damage and harm to his body as a result of what he did. And he was always trying to outdo himself. That's why he was so successful. And another thing I found really admirable about him, he was always pushing the envelope. He always had to outdo himself. He had to outdo his own best last trick, right?
So the kind of depth described in the story matches what we've seen in that Italian study, or
Yeah.
what they believe they've seen beneath the Giza complex.
Yeah.
We've established that lowering him into such a depth by rope, possible,
Yep.
survivable, as long as the person surviving it is Houdini. There were another
And we know
couple-
he did travel to Egypt at this time
Yeah.
with his wife in
There was-
between these engagements.
There were a couple of other interesting notes there, because in the story, he talks about these composite mummy creatures, these mummies that have had animal parts grafted onto them. We know now that actually was a practice in ancient Egypt. There have been animal mummies that are composites of different animals sewn together, and there are human mummies with animal parts grafted onto them. It was often a practice when they didn't have the complete body to mummify.
Right.
They would swap in animal parts, but there was also instances of actually grafting animal heads onto human mummies, basically to make them look like the Egyptian deities.
Yeah.
That was practiced at least sometimes, but that wasn't discovered until the 60s.
Okay.
And this story
Interesting.
was published in the 20s,
Yeah.
based on a trip that supposedly happened in 1910.
If he did see something like that down there, maybe there's some color thrown in by Lovecraft in terms of them shambling about reanimated, perhaps. But maybe he did see some scary creatures down there, some mummies, or gone through this process of the grafting. Who knows?
The other part I really got fixated on when I was kind of looking into the story was the Sphinx itself.
Yeah.
Because in the story, Houdini / Lovecraft, towards the end of the story, when he's reflecting on this experience, he's saying that he must have witnessed something even older than ancient Egypt, something pre-ancient Egypt,
Yeah.
some ancient god.
Yeah.
Beneath
An
the
arcane
earth.
monster.
Yeah, the interesting thing about the Sphinx, and this is something that was not really talked about until the 90s, because, the mainstream view is that the Sphinx was built by Khafra in 2500 BC. But in the 90s, this alternate theory became very popular, in that the Sphinx was actually far older, that the ancient Egyptians didn't build the Sphinx. They kind of inherited the Sphinx from a far older civilization, because they can see water erosion,
Yeah.
or what appears to be water erosion on
Yeah.
the body of the Sphinx.
Yeah. And around the cavity that it was contained within, the walls that kind of surround it.
Yeah.
Because at the time Houdini would have been there, that probably still would have been buried to a good degree. Mm-hmm. Most of the body of the Sphinx, because that wasn't excavated until much later.
Yeah.
So seeing a lot of that erosion, that water erosion, would be a later discovery. But
The-
like you
the-
say, it kind of falls in line with this idea.
Yeah. So the last time Egypt would have been wet enough to cause that erosion would have been
12,000 years ago, the Younger,
I've got it
is
here in
the
my
Younger
notes.
Dryas thing. Are
Yeah,
we getting
the-
into
the-
Graham Hancock Younger
it
Dryas
was-
stuff?
Yeah. It was just after the Younger Dryas period. It was called the African Humid period.
Yeah,
And yeah, that would have placed it about 12,000 years ago.
yeah,
So predating dynastic Egypt by a good 8 or 9,000 years.
yeah. There's a Dr. Robert Schock who's contributed a lot to this research and this theory.
Yeah, I actually started really looking into the beliefs of pre-dynastic Egypt. Some of those beliefs survived into what we now know of as dynastic ancient Egypt. The underworld, the Duat, But the pre-dynastic Egyptians, they actually saw the underworld as a real physical place. It wasn't some metaphorical, spiritual place you went to when you died. No, the underworld was an actual physical space below the ground.
Yeah.
With entrances on the surface. Entrances that had to be carefully guarded because they were dangerous. Because there was all sorts of awful monsters and creatures underground. A lot of their stone monuments built during this period were thought to mark entrances to the underworld. Isn't it interesting that the Sphinx possibly dates back to this period?
Yeah.
If you were a pre-dynastic Egyptian, afraid of entrances to the underworld, it was a dangerous place. It was dangerous ground. If you saw a statue of a giant apex predator, like a lion,
Yeah.
what would you interpret that to be but a warning, right?
Yeah.
This is dangerous ground. Don't go here.
Yeah.
There's dangerous stuff here.
Yeah, or at least as some kind of guardian
Yeah.
of something that needed to be protected. We should start thinking about wrapping up pretty soon.
There's one other story about the Sphinx. I just have to get to it.
All right, hit me with it.
This has to do with, we've talked so much on previous episode about how demons have to be invited in. You have to let evil in. There was this pharaoh called Thutmose IV.
Okay.
Now, prior to this, there was actually no inscription on the Sphinx. It's just a statue, no writing on it. Thutmose IV put an inscription on the Sphinx because Thutmose was the son of Amenhotep II. And when Amenhotep II died, Thutmose was not expected to inherit the throne. Thutmose's brother, Amenhotep III, was kind of the expected heir. Thutmose describes having the Sphinx. The Sphinx was buried at this point. It was completely buried.
Okay, yep.
But he describes the Sphinx coming to him in a dream vision and offering him kingship if he freed the Sphinx from its prison.
Oh, okay.
So
Spooky.
Thutmose actually has the Sphinx excavated. It was completely buried prior to that.
So did anyone even know it was there?
Precisely at that time. I mean, the Sphinx had been buried and uncovered and then buried again and then uncovered. And,
Yeah.
you know, as the sand shifted. At that specific time, I don't know if anyone knew its exact location, but it was supposedly completely buried. And Thutmose said he had this dream vision. The Sphinx offered him kingship if he freed the Sphinx. He forms a team and he begins excavating the Sphinx. And he overthrows his brother and becomes the pharaoh. And there is an inscription beneath the Sphinx now that was placed there by Thutmose. I have it here. Let me just pull it up.
Whoa. Slow down. Are you going to put any Egyptian curses on us by reading this? Is this
No.
like a spell out of the Necronomicon?
No. This is actually just the inscription Thutmose had placed on the Sphinx. It's still there to this day.
Okay, is this on the placard that's in front of between the two paws?
Yeah, that's actually called the Dream Stele. Thutmose was who had it put there. And it reads, "Behold thou me, my son Thutmose. I am thy father Horam Akhet Kaperi Ra'atum. I will give to thee my kingdom upon earth at the head of the living. Thou shalt wear the white crown and red crown upon the throne of Geb." Geb is like the god of the earth. "The hereditary prince. The land shall be thine in its length and in its breadth, that which the eye of the All-Lord shines upon. The food of the two lands shall be thine, the great tribute of all countries. My face is directed to you, my heart is to you. Thou shalt be to me the protector of my affairs, because I am ailing in all my limbs. The sands of the sanctuary upon which I am have reached me. Turn to me in order to do what I desire. I know that thou art my son, my protector. Behold, I am with thee, I am thy leader." This is what Thutmose claimed the Sphinx spoke to him in a dream. It's actually thought now that Thutmose was schizophrenic.
Really?
Yeah. Apparently throughout his reign, he had these insane dream visions and hallucinations. He actually didn't live very long after he became pharaoh. And when they found his mummy, they could tell that at the end of his life, he was quite emaciated and ill.
Right. That could have been anything. I mean, lots of people have insane dream visions. I have pretty insane dreams myself.
But
Doesn't mean you're schizophrenic.
But he...
I'm sure there's other elements that play into that.
He uncovered the evil, you know?
Yeah.
He
maybe set it loose on the world.
Yeah.
Interesting. Well, yeah, I really like this. I really like this story. I really like that it plays into that pulpy Victorian era mysticism about Egypt. You know, if I could time travel, that's probably the era, one of the eras I'd most want to visit is that kind of late 18th century, early 19th century Victorian area. Because the world was changing so dramatically. You're right in the middle of the Industrial Revolution. And things are advancing very rapidly, but there's still a lot of unknowns and a lot of mystery to the world.
Yeah.
I think it would have been a really exciting time, and kind of the archaeology and Egyptology that was exploding at that time. Just there's a lot of romanticism around that I really like. But now that we're kind of rolling up to the end, we're wrapping up. Tell me, what do you think of this story? For me, definitely I think a lot about sensory deprivation. Especially when Houdini, who's very much a skeptic, is talking about these crazy visions. He's not confident in what he saw or didn't see. He thinks they were just dream hallucinations. And definitely under sensory deprivation. If you're stuck in a cavern where there's no sound and no light, you can have incredibly intense hallucinations. Mm-hmm. That's something that happens. How much of this story, and I challenge the audience again, hit us in the comments, how much of this story do you think is truth? Either from Houdini's own perspective, how much of it is Lovecraftian exaggeration and just colorful, making it fun? I'm losing my words. But anyway, take it from there.
Well, I'll tell you what. For myself, I believe Houdini saw something in Egypt in 1910. Because it's interesting, because he very much dabbled in the occult earlier in his life. Later on in his life, he becomes this isn't real, this is fake, I'm going to disprove all of it. He becomes more insistent on this in his later years, even go to the point where saying practicing in this is dangerous, it is evil. And it's interesting, that shift between a curiosity about the occult and saying, it's bad, avoid it, it's not real, happens about the time he got back from Egypt, actually.
Yeah, and I mean, you could look at that as a trauma response.
It's almost like right? he saw something
he needed
that spooked
to reject it because he realized it was real.
Yeah, he saw something that spooked him so much. And he's like, no, I didn't see that.
Yeah.
Definitely not.
Doesn't exist.
Put it away.
Yeah. Yeah, that could be. That definitely could be. I mean, definitely going back over the story, there's a lot of elements to it that feel like just really well crafted storytelling. Mm-hmm. Like his guide Abdu Rees resembling the pharaoh and then leading these horrors underground and actually resembling Khafra.
Yeah, almost like
I think that's
Houdini
a lot of that
was going to be made the sacrifice.
Yeah, I think a lot of that is just really good storytelling elements maybe
that's
peppered
more,
in.
That's more Lovecraft than Houdini.
Yeah. But I look at it in terms of, we know he went to Egypt, he took this trip. So I think the fight on the scam he fell for, the fight on the pyramid, being lowered into the cave, I think that might all be real. Mm-hmm. At least that, up to that point, up to that element of it. Based on how the story's told, and the surrounding circumstance, and the fact that this came to be written because he was telling this wild, fantastical story about Egypt.
Yeah. In
his personal life to friends and family, right? Apparently reluctantly.
Yeah, and he is very careful to put that disclaimer at the end of the story.
Yeah.
It had to have been a dream.
And throughout,
Surely it was a dream.
Throughout the entire story, he's trying to dismiss it all as a dream of something, a concoction of his mind. And maybe it was, but he still seems to insist on the vividness of the experience.
Yeah.
And in the same breath. So I believe he experienced something. Otherwise, I don't think the story would exist. And I think it's just a lot of fun that it's got this Lovecraftian flair to it.
I just think it was really cool. I had so much fun the past couple of weeks just learning all about ancient Egypt. Barely scratched my notes on this one, but I had so much fun learning all of this, and I uncovered some really cool stuff, and all of that came from this little key in this often overlooked little story of H.P. Lovecraft.
Yeah.
It's not one of his classics. It's often overlooked, and neither Lovecraft nor Houdini really spoke of this again.
Yeah.
After this story
even
was
though
published.
they continued to collaborate on other pieces.
Houdini and Lovecraft?
Yeah.
I don't believe they did.
No. Houdini kept offering Lovecraft more ghostwriting opportunities and work because he was so impressed with him.
I'm not familiar with any of those stories. Were any of them published?
I don't know about Yeah, I think they were. This is all in the Wikipedia page on this story that they collaborated on other works. So that's my source. So I mean, take it with
I will have
a
to,
dose of Wikipedia salt.
Yeah, I'll have to look into that because, as far as I know, this was their only collaboration that was published, at least.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know about published, not published, but anyway, we should wrap it up there. I really think we ought to dedicate this episode to our nephew Tate, because he
loves Cthulhu.
Yeah, he loves Cthulhu. He's probably going to be a big Lovecraft fan, and he just doesn't know it yet because he loves monsters.
Yeah.
At Christmas, he just sat down next to me on the couch with and one of his gifts was just like a sketch pad because he loves drawing, and he was just drawing monsters, one page after another. He'd just draw a monster. He's like, and he was doing exactly this Egypt thing where he was like, this one's going to have the body of a goat, but the head of an owl, and dragon wings, and he just likes making these weird chimeric Lovecraft.
That sounds really cool.
Right? Yeah. So I think he would dig this. When he grows up a little bit, I think he's going to love this story. Mm-hmm. But anyway, let's leave it there. Thanks for joining, everyone.
Don't forget.
Don't forget to do what?
Like and subscribe.
Like and subscribe. And please leave us a comment. Tell us what you think of this. I thought it was amazing. It was a really fun time. I hope you do too. Look out for that companion piece in February for the video. I think that's going to be a lot of fun. But yeah, we'll let everyone get back to your weekend. And I hope everyone's doing well and enjoyed this. And we'll see you next time. Good night.
Good night.